they're obviously listening, they're comprehending, but their reaction, the immediate reaction to physicality, a fight scene, a sword fight, why is that? Is it because they can do it themselves? Why do they react so fast towards a physicality thing happening?
Well, your children learn through doing, isn't it? Through discovering first through their senses, and then they interpret it later on through their language. Actually read an article saying by month 3, our vestibular system forms, and our ears, and that whole thing of vibrations, and babies feeling vibrations from birth, and how they make sense through the world with vibrations. So if we have it's for the young audience, they first sense the vibration, they first sense the physicality, and then they make meaning thereof. So it's an interesting question about language, because I'm quite scared of using language at some times. I don't want it to be didactic. And I mean, an example of yesterday, we have a little frog instrument, and as soon as we get that out, the little one said, "Padaiki," and then we respond when we say, yes, it's a frog, but not to respond first for them to respond, but to see and feel and hear, and then it comes over in language. Yeah.
With regards to the sound and I would even think sometimes of pushing it even further. Rowlen was saying that children and young people respond so much to physicality, but I would say we do too, like as adults. And why is it that all of a sudden the physicality seems to disappear in theater when it becomes for adults? Because I like theater with much more physicality myself as well. And so from a writing point of view, I'm also wondering, does all writing have to be about spoken word? I have seen scripts that were no dialogue, zero, but it was still written as a script, totally for physicality. And so that was just something that I wanted to throw out, like, does it always have to be about words? And with regards to pushing the boundaries, I mean, I haven't been in Holland as much anymore, but from my memory, I always felt that it was the theater for young audiences that was pushing the boundary. They were actually pushing the boundary. That's where a lot of exploration and experiment was happening, far more than in the theater for adults. So,
young people haven't lost the ability to tap into their imagination. And there is an openness that they are looking to have filled. And you can play in the most wonderful ways because they just jump in and say yes. So the older the crowd, the older the teenager, the less likely they are to just say yes to whatever the situation is, to whatever the improv is, because they're so aware of what's happening around them and who they like. But I think with children, it is absolutely astounding. I always feel when working with them, and also just as an audience member, how much I am fueled by the spirit of imagination.
We were watching Wag for Godot, Waiting for Godot, and it was my fellow actor in Baba Go Wild. So, I mean, we create for 0 to 6-year-olds, and we watched the moment in Godot, and we were like, that's basically the two of us in our performance, and we had such a laugh because they had this physicality, the sounds to it, and we saw the connection and the correlation, and the adult audience enjoyed it just as much. And I also really struggle with that, and to put it into text. How do I write what we do? And Liz May asked me, what about text, Mark? And it's the second year I'm really struggling. I don't know how to put it into text. So that's really a question that we can ask for ourselves. Yeah.
With children, to tap into the limbic brain, so that you're working within that system where emotion is totally a language. It doesn't need, so the sounds that come out are initially the vowels, and that carries the meaning. It carries the emotion, the ow, and that's what they play with when they're very little. And when they get older, even adults, if I'm teaching a drama class and it's a vocal class, besides all the other stuff about resonance and breath work and everything else, when you're looking at language, it is the idea that the vowels carry the emotion and the consonants carry the meaning to everything that you're doing. So it's interesting that they respond with action, but the action is the action is the vibration of the sound. Thank you. The action is the impulse of the action. I find is based in authenticity, and it's based in the core of the emotion. And I think when it comes to crossing boundaries with different language, different cultures, different ages, because even working with a very old audience as well, is you can fly language out the window and just go, ooh, wow, huh? And there's a whole story before you even know it. And I think things like that have never really, we haven't discovered that. I mean, something like Textmark, they're looking for texts. How do you write a text which is sound-based and get an actor to move that, to work it, to, what is that? I think there's a language there that we need to have the time to explore, because it needs that. Children need the time to explore, and we don't get afforded that because we're rushing around trying to pay the rent and do this and do that. So yeah, time, access, so that you can explore. It's insane that we are within the creative industry where literally you need to be playing in the one thing, rehearsing the next thing, and doing the other thing while waiting, learning your lines for the next audition that you need to go to. So for me, it's always the currency that I'm looking at is time. Is can we open that up, please, into something which is more translatable to really, really crafting what it is that we do, rather than just making do with what we have. I'm at a point now when I say no. If somebody says, oh, you've got 2 weeks, it's a wonderful project, sorry it's so little time, I'm like, no, what do you want to do in 2 weeks? What? What is that going to be? I'm going to just start with my foot needs 2 weeks.
Is language a boundary for young audiences? And if so, what are the ways in which we could break it and play with that boundary? Does that make sense?
For me, language is totally not a boundary. You need to do it as an authentic way as possible. Like, if children hear a certain guy, you're like, oh, a Moroccan guy doesn't talk on that like that. This guy doesn't, this girl doesn't talk like that. You don't believe it, yeah, it's fine. For me, it's totally no boundaries at all. You can write totally wrong and bad sentences, but if you believe it, it's totally okay.
Everything is big, everything is colorful, everything is crazy, and then we add a lot of language lessons into it. But we do all of our plays in English and Afrikaans. So we cast bilingual actors, and they can do the full play in English and they can do the full play in Afrikaans. And that obviously depends on where we go. At Vrystaat, we were Afrikaans, Vrystaat Square, we were English, and we kind of adapt to that. And it's fascinating how the play kind of changes culturally as well, where the characters change and develop, and immediately they become relatable to whoever's watching it in that language, because if you watch something in your home language, it opens up your imagination even more. But it's exactly the same thing. If we're not authentic about it, it's not going to work. If we cast an actor who doesn't feel confident in that language, they're immediately going to sense this guy's lying to me, because they're very, very susceptible to that. But I had a fabulous English teacher when I was in primary school, and I was at an Afrikaans school, and my mom asked her, so how do we get our kids to develop their English vocabulary? Because she was quite stressed about that. She didn't want us to just, speak Afrikaans and speak Afrikaans with an English accent or whatever, English with an Afrikaans accent. And the teacher turned around and said, just teach them proper Afrikaans at home, please. Because if I am in the classroom and I have to explain to them the meaning of mercy, if they don't know what genade is in Afrikaans, I can't explain to them what it means in English. So learn your home language as best as you can, because then you can access other languages easier and you can access other ideas. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. Doing a plain Afrikaans in English is not highly recommended, but it's a lot of fun.
It's quite interesting for me, obviously, because, like I said, still learning, working with young audiences, and I was telling Schoemé that Monday and yesterday, we didn't have a lot of young audiences. You saw, you were also there, Faye. We just had two children. You were also there, Jeff. And then tomorrow is our opportunity to actually work with children, because we bring their children home to the show. But yeah, so I'm very nervous about that, because it almost feels like it's the first time the show is actually going to experience how it is. But just drawing together language in community and how that can reflect in our work as we try to engage with audiences authentically as well. I just wanted to find out more now that Lucia and you, Jeff, are here. There's, what do you call it? It's bit down. What do you call it? Yes. If you can tell us more about that before I leave, which is a good example for me of a language formed in community, like you had said, that can allow us to connect deeper with our audiences, our younger audiences, because it's for a specific group of people, and it's, yeah, but you can explain more about it.
The Pietao, I don't know where it started, but it's a language that the brown people speak in their communities. Not all brown people. If I can refer back to my community, me and my mom speak it, and my older sister, we speak it in the house when we want to say something in front of my dad that we don't want him to understand. And he usually gets upset at that. It's Afrikaans that you take, and then you just put some vowels and consonants in between. So I can ask you, what is your name? And then I would say, Vapat so that would be, my dad don't understand it, so if you want to gossip about him, he will speak the Pietao. So I don't know where it started, but obviously it's in brown communities. Of course it's Afrikaans, and it's only the way I saw it. Can I quickly say something about what you said about using a language and using sentences, but the way that you also say it also differs. And it made me feel while I was sitting there, because again, I was thinking about brown people. Just the word hello. Like, how would you say hello? So hello can be a greeting, but hello can also be a warning. So yeah, so we have those kind of things. Yeah.
I also think theatre of young audiences, kids are brutally honest. Brutally honest. So, I mean, when you're performing or whatever, there's an immediate reaction. It's yes or no, excitement, or get me out of here crying. And you've got to carry on. And it can either be a disease and go on through the rest of the audience, and you've lost the hour, and you feel like crap in the end, because you're like, wow, I have failed today. And tomorrow you do exactly the same thing, and it's a stunning success. And you go, how does it? But it's influence, and people are influenced. And that's what Danielle said also with the corruption was that. And then the next kid was like, yeah, water, and then it went there, and then it got eventually to, okay, this boy is not looking at me, like when they got to that superficial level. But yeah, kids are brutally honest towards each other, towards you. They'll just shout out a remark, it doesn't matter, but then afterwards, they'll be best friends because it's in and out. But something sticks. Something somewhere sticks, whether it's from home and they react to something that happened on stage, or they grip and grasp something in your script and they go. So we also, there's no, what can I call it, Gugu Gaga language. It's especially when we do Rowlen in English, it's borderline Shakespearean. That's where it is, and it sticks to that level of English. And it teaches them something as well, and they've got to listen. And it also teaches our cast, which is just over the Theatre of Young Audiences thing. So two of us are quite older, and then the rest of them, we found them at Article 15 and Danielle through the years, and young Vasti, and they've now traveled with us for 5 years, and they're now 23, 24, also still trying to figure out themselves. And when they stick to this, and they're still brutally honest to each other as well. We don't, most of the time, don't even have to crit them, they take each other out, which is fantastic. So yeah, I just want to add the brutal honesty is sometimes really hard to deal with, but also so rewarding.
We need to be whales here and swim in that ocean and have absolutely no boundaries. And I think that is where, when we're looking at youth, that is where we are missing the point. It's too focused into tiny little areas. I think we need to open up the boundaries and just, soos hulle sê in Afrikaans, gooi.
With a lot of the forms that I've studied, they actually were created by youth. And I would say a good percentage of the time out of resistance and out of, as a voice. So for instance, in Chicago, there's a street dance called Chicago Footwork, or just Footwork when you're in Chicago. And it was created by Chicago youth. And it's a language. So like if you grow up in Chicago, specifically in the Black community, you have an uncle or a cousin, or maybe you yourself, who footwork. And it comes with the music, and the music is the sound. But not just for Chicago, right? Breaking in New York was created by New York youth, and that has a sound. Hip hop has a sound, and so like it's similar, but it's different in different communities. In New Orleans, they have bounce, New Orleans bounce. And so these are like sounds in a language that these youth are creating, and then, you know, youth become adults. But it's like a tradition passed down throughout the years. And I think it's really interesting. I see the connections of like, wow, you know, Black youth, that's, you know, usually what I focus on. Black youth are, and youth of color are creating these languages that they embody with sound and their actual body. And a lot of times you can hear these same people say, well, footwork saved my life, or hip hop saved my life. Hip hop gave me a voice. And so it's very interesting, and to hear about how, you know, the use of sound and even lingo or language or what do we call it, slang in the US can be different in Chicago than it is in Houston, Texas. And it's like, if you live there, like, you know that lingo, but if I come there and you're like, oh, this John, blah, blah, I'm like, what is John? That is very, very used in Philly, but in Chicago, it's not really a thing, but we say, you good. You good has like 10 different meanings, but if you're in Chicago, and depending on how you say it, like the sound of how you say you good, or you good, or you good, like it's like 10 different meanings, and you understand it based on the sounds, based on like community. So I think that's very interesting.
Got me thinking about the political and how young people respond to the political. And a lot of your work has been political in nature. You have one called Malcolm X, you have another one called Dear Winnie, it's about Winnie Mandela. I knew that you would probably assume that, but it's about Winnie Mandela. And I wanted to hear about your reasoning for choosing those political figures. And also I know that hip hop is also quite a big influence and part of the way that you like to address issues. So maybe you can speak to the influence of hip hop, and also the use of political figures and the calling of political figures in your theatre.
Like about the Winnie is a piece inspired by Winnie Mandela. My theatre company, the director, Junior Mtombeni, South African. His father was a ANC freedom fighter that fled to Belgium, and he sent letters to Winnie Mandela, and that was the inspiration of the play. And we did like 9 actresses, 9 black performance actresses, and it was like a really big thing in Belgium and Holland. And it was for the youth a real learning process because they didn't know nothing about Winnie Mandela, and the people that know something about Winnie, she was like a devil. We tried to turn the story about Winnie Mandela. And Malcolm X is, I really liked Malcolm X from my youth because of the movie from and we also think, how can Malcolm X can inspire the youth today? And we did it with jazz, with dance, with performance, and it was a real big success, especially for the youth in Belgium and in Holland. And the hip hop thing, I always wanted to be a rapper. I had a really good flow, but no rhythm, so that so writing was my plan B.
Here we are. Belle, with you, with your experience in Belgium, do you see similar themes coming up in Belgium with youth for young audiences that these people are talking about? I was just wondering, like, listening to the conversation, what sparked?
It's really similar, like with the same struggles and with the same dreams. So for me, it's really similar, and I really like to listen to them and what they want to do and what they try to do, their mistakes, the good stuff. So for me, it's like it's a universal thing. The same shit, and the same like joy and happiness. So like it's like that's familiar. Like I know this. So it rings a lot of bells for me.
I think there's something about, because there's a certain skepticism that comes in with older teenagers, and I think they tend to really then all of a sudden go into realism. They want the realism, they want it to be real, as much as real as possible. So I completely agree with the imagination, and there's something also that I love about younger kids, that they can really focus on one. They might not necessarily focus on the whole, but they can get deep into one little thing that we sometimes as adults don't see anymore, because we look at the whole and we're kind of forgetting about something that is so deep and small there. So that's something I really think also, I don't know how to say that in words of like writing, but there is something in that I feel like we as adults are missing, that children have.
There's something about like when, as you age, wanting to be taken seriously, so that like the playing with sound or whatever, especially sound isn't recognized. I think people play a lot more with text than text is recognized, but like what does it mean when you're playing with the sound of it? So my cues are terrible, but for example, I like the young Kwelas. And they're like, yo, what's that cool, what's that cool? Like, and they just click, right? And it's got like some hip hop flavor. It's got some hip hop flavor to it. And when I tell older people, like my age mates, they're kind of like, oh, this is so funny, and they want to make fun of it. And I'm like, there's something very beautiful about and young about people playing with language and finding that sense of community that I don't think always happens as we get older. We stop trying to figure out what does like my community sound like, and can we create a particular lexicon that mirrors where we're at. Yeah, which I thought was an interesting provocation when you were talking about sound and like what the sound can do to us and how that travels.